Welcome in, Believe in Commanders podcast. Scott Jackson and Anthony Armstrong, part of the Believe Network. And Anthony, can you believe what the Cowboys just did? Oh, my goodness.
My gosh, Jerry Jones, once again, he took the throne. He took the lead of the person who's going to get all the media attention. Micah Parsons traded, y'all. To have this happen in Dallas, all right? And then obviously with the Luka trade and now Micah, two of the biggest young stars in this city have been traded to their new respective cities and towns. This is shocking. This is shocking to really have to sit here and go through.
It really is. But of course, you want to like, follow, and comment, please, on this podcast and wherever you get your better podcasts. We appreciate that. But from a strictly Washington standpoint, so what are we missing without Micah Parsons in this division? Well, over 8 games, listen to this, 10.5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and 15 quarterback hits over that period of time. It's insane. I mean, he was a game wrecker. Obviously, Dan Quinn knows him well. The thing that makes me sick about this deal is that it happened in the NFC. And, of course, this is the week 2 opponent for Washington. Although, with as little as he's done in training camp, maybe he's on a pitch count early in the season just to be careful. I don't know. But he is a game wrecker. So glad he's out of the division at least. But, of course, you got Abdul Carter now in the division of the Giants. But it's just wild to think this deal came down a week before their opener, Anthony. I mean, a week before their opener, they make this move. I just feel like if they had done this, I don't know, at draft time, they would have gotten maybe even a much bigger haul, maybe like 3 number ones,
Man, it would have probably been whatever you wanted. You know what I mean? You could have got a house, a car, and equity in the organization if you would have made that trade back then before the draft. But not having to go against Micah Parsons, it has to give you a little sigh of relief.
Sure.
Obviously they did secure the offensive line. I think the O-line was going to perform well. But, like you mentioned, week 2, he may not be all the way warmed up, but week 4, he's going to be coming back to Dallas. And on FanDuel, they were so sweet to make themselves a special line over under 1/2 of a sack for Micah Parsons. That's a line over there on FanDuel. You can check that out. And then his over under for the season, 12.75 sacks. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does up there. But I'm glad that hopefully he don't get any against Washington.
Right. Well, I mean, you're in the heart of it. You were in that organization. I mean, I think there was still a belief, even yesterday when I saw the report, a few hours beforehand, that they might actually trade him if they're, swept at their feet. There was a Packer story the day before, which I didn't think was real. I was like, oh, come on. They wouldn't trade him in the conference. That would be so stupid. Well, Jerry Jones says, hold my, Johnny Walker Blue, I guess, in this case. But it's just wild. I mean, they've gone through these crazy public negotiations in the past, but none of them have been as nasty as this one. And I think throughout the McLaurin saga, you and I have talked about it quite a bit, said, hey, look, no matter what we think about this thing and your emotions get tied up and you think it's not going to happen, at least they have not kind of gotten on a personal level as Dallas and Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons seem to have gotten throughout that negotiation. So it's just wild to think a week out they make this move. And I watched a lot of that press conference last night and him trying to sell them on the better run defense with Kenny Clark and all that. That's fine. But guess what? Your pass defense is going to be totally exposed now too, by the way.
Yeah, but Kenny Clark is a good player, quality player. He's coming in there.
A lot older than Micah.
A lot older than Micah. I think he still got some tires, some tread on the tires. But Commanders folks, really division focus. Does this shake up the division in any way for you? I mean, if anything, you would think that it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable that you're going to be in the top 2 from Commanders' standpoint. You got to be staunchly in the top 2. Obviously, they're still talented on offense. They're still going to have some good players, and they're going to want to go out there and prove some things. So how do you think this shakes up the entire division?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of, had people had Dallas either the 3rd or, if you're high on the Giants at 3rd and the Cowboys 4th. I thought their offense was going to be better just by having Dak back, right? Whether, if hopefully the whole season for them, they get him back. The running game's still a big question mark. Their backs are not anybody that you're going to get excited about necessarily right now. But the George Pickens thing's interesting. That could work really well, or it could go the other way because here's a guy playing for a contract, wasn't happy with his role in Pittsburgh all the time, and yet he was the number one in Pittsburgh. He's not going to be the number one in Dallas with obviously what they have there in CeeDee Lamb. So, that'll be interesting. Defensively, you can't help but think they've taken a huge step back. I thought one of the great things Dan Quinn did when he was there was he kind of disguised how okay that secondary was. I don't think those players are really truly shut down guys, Bland and Diggs. They make plays, they play the ball, but when you don't have a guy rushing the quarterback like this guy did, wrecking games, that's it's just not going to be as good. And Dante Fowler had an almost career type year here with the Commanders last year. He's now your number one pass rusher in Dallas. Remember, Dallas thought so much of him a year ago, they let him leave. So it's kind of wild to see how it turned about. And again, I just, Jerry Jones, don't ever change, by the way. I mean, like I know I'm echoing what Eagles, Giants fans feel the same way, but please just keep doing you. You make headlines. Don't let people tell you need to move quickly on deals. Please wait to the last minute and either overspend or make crazy trades when you're shorthanded. What just please don't change.
Look, man, there are a few times in the division where everybody is cheering in unison. Everybody's like, "Oh, right.
Good,
okay, all right, I can get with Dallas. This. Great move, great decision. I love seeing that thing happen." Hold on, we'll pause.
Our pleasure right now here in Believe in Commanders podcast, part of the Believe Network, to bring in Ben Standig from Substack, Last Man Standing Substack. You can give him a follow there. Ben, Anthony and I have just been our heads have been spinning, and we're, almost coming up with the 24-hour point of the Micah Parsons trade. Just first of all, thanks for coming on, and just your reaction to it when you saw it yesterday.
I mean, I think like everybody else, I just assumed that eventually they would get a deal done, similar to they did with Dak and with CeeDee Lamb, and this was the MO. But in doing some work on my end, sort of independent of this, and talking to people around the league over the last few days, there was definitely more of a sense that Jerry was going to have to change his tune for this to get done. He obviously didn't. I will say this: I'm obviously congrats to the NFC East, like you said, for him getting kicked out of the division. Tremendous. The only thing I really kind of fault Jerry for here is not having just done this 4 months ago or before the draft. Like
100%.
I definitely have heard enough of whereas like with Terry McLaurin, all we ever talk about is what a great locker room leader beyond the football park, great presence, culture builder, all these things. Micah, not so much. People in Dallas seem to really have loved Dak and CeeDee Lamb and Zach Martin, and it was much more of a mixed bag with Micah. So if they felt he just wasn't a good fit for them anymore internally, I get it. Great player, but yeah, he needed to have done this a while ago. That's the real rub for me.
Yeah. I saw the stats that wrote. Scott read them off. The stats that Micah had against Washington will get you a big contract anyways. I just thought that was impressive. I'm super glad that he's gone, but let's focus on the team that's at hand and, the team we're here now. With Terry back in the mix, how much more comfortable does the team feel? Like, has the aura changed now that 17's under contract, and how do you think this is going to carry the team into the season?
Yeah, look, obviously he's one of their best players, and offensively he's their best outside guy. Like, they would never say this publicly, but watching practices, it was rough seeing even for Jaden throwing to the outside. The inter squad scrimmage that they did the one day, partly the offensive line was missing a lot of guys that day also, so that wasn't great. But it was the rare time that he looked almost kind of flustered. But when the receivers are not getting open, what do you do? So Deebo Samuel's look great, but he's not typically your outside guy. So the fact that element is now back, also having Noah Brown back is going to be helpful on that regard as well. No, without question. But yeah, I think everybody's breathing a sigh of relief that Terry's back, that they can get going again. This offense carried the team last year. They obviously hope the defense is better. We'll see. But they've got to have to still score 28 points a game or what have you. And now they've upgraded the offensive line. They add Deebo. Now Terry, like, this should be a group that has that capability, but you needed him on the field without question.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see him obviously in week one. The question is this going to be a CeeDee Lamb kind of transition from an extended, hold out, hold in, whatever you want to call it? Or is it going to be, one of these disaster things like a Brandon Ayuk situation? I know you guys talked a lot about that with Terry the other day about where he was physically, but I mean, what's the sense people are giving you around there where, is it going to be like a snap count here in the early start of the season for him, or are they going to be no limitations?
Well, I mean, Adam Peters was asked, might even be by me, was asked about this the other day, just like, what's the deal with, how do you sense that these guys are going to be ready? He's like, we'll just have to monitor practice after practice and see, can they do the full workload, or do we have to go dial it back a little bit less? I would be silly to not ask the wide receiver here. Yeah. He's got basically 11 days from the point of he showed up this week to the game day. Is that enough? I know everybody is different, and I'm sure he's in great regular condition, but is that enough time to be in football condition to do the things he's going to have to do out there?
Well, the other day I was telling Scott I wasn't showing up because I pulled my hammy quad running some 40s out front. So the issue is when you don't know how the defender is going to react, right? So not knowing what the defense is going to do could just put you in an awkward situation. I could see them giving him a little bit of a ramp up, probably pulling him every so often. But hey, when it comes down to crunch time, you're going to put 17 in there. But I would expect maybe try to start the season heavy on this running game and see what they can do. Spread it across Big Bill, across Merritt, obviously Rodriguez and those guys. But I would say it's best to slowly roll him out there, right? Not let him start and let him do his thing, but kind of give him a little bit of a pitch count we might play.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like, how whenever they run out, 12 personnel, maybe that's a good time to take Terry out. Not only then you don't have to involve him in blocking if you're going to run, but yeah, you're focusing a little bit on something else. Give him those plays off, and you can still have Debo and Noah Brown or Jalen Lane out there and go that direction. So I think they have to. I would imagine slow it up a little bit. I'm a nervous Nelly, but you just don't want to have this thing linger. Something happens and all of a sudden it's week 4 and week 10 and still on the quote unquote injury report with something. You don't want that.
And they do. Well, they do that no huddle. So, I would just say you're just going to see more rotation in there. He'll be out there for the first, 2 plays. You get that first down, probably pull him once you get the first, then let him get back out. So just that's something to watch for as we get into these games against the Giants.
Believe in Commanders podcast, part of Believe Network. Ben Standig is with us at Ben Standig on the X, and you can also follow him on Substack, Last Man Standig there. All right, so what was the number? We looked this up earlier, Anthony. Is it 975 yards for Terry McLaurin this year? Was the over-under on FanDuel? What do you think about that, Ben? I was saying to Anthony, even with prior to the hold in and the whole contract, I was kind of wondering, well, maybe his numbers will be, in terms of the reception and at least the targeting part of it will go down, certainly because of Deebo Samuel, but perhaps, depending on how you look at it, there'll be more big play opportunities for him. So how do you kind of balance that, from a standpoint? Do you think he'll have, similar yard numbers over 1,000, or do you think maybe we should dial it back with the expectations? Obviously there's a lot of money involved for him to get more than 1,000, as we saw with those incentive clauses.
Right. I was going to say, I think the number he's focused on is, I think it's 1,083 yards. He gets that. It's 300,000 in his bank account. Terry McLaurin is such a fascinating case. We all understand the reasons why he's considered to be such an important piece, that he's been such an impressive receiver here. He's great with contested catches. Last year, he got in the end zone at a pace he'd never had before. And yet he's never had 1,200-yard season. He's never had like those huge number of reception seasons. So even last year, like his targets weren't like exceptionally high for a guy who's viewed as like the number one. So you're right. Debo could alter that. I looked this up the other day, and don't nobody steal this out there. I'm going to write about this. We always talk about how this quarterback carousel he's had to deal with before Jaden Daniels, which is legit. Go look at the number 2 receivers he's had to play with. Like Stevens, like in terms of like who had the second most catches, like Steven Sims, Adam Humphries. Even last year was Zacchaeus, not knocking on Zacchaeus, but that's not Gary Clark to Art Monk. So Debo is the first time, and I know they had Curtis Samuel, but I think it's even that. I think it's still a little bit different.
On the field.
So this is the first time a defense is going to have to account for the other guy with Debo, and that is a big difference. So yes, that could give Terry more freedom at times than he's had in the past, which therefore could raise his numbers. But I think I would go over unless the injury thing scares me, but I would go probably over if you're asking me.
Yeah, I'd run the over. I'd even look to see him increase his touchdown total as well. I could see him having same exact receptions. And Ben, you put it all on exactly out there perfectly. I'm gonna let you write about it on your Substack. I'm gonna subscribe as well so I can read that. But
Appreciate
it is Debo's going to attract the attention. He can do a lot of the work. And I'd say go look at the tape when they had Noah Brown out there. His physicality against the safety helped, one, open the run game, and then it's going to help open that play action game. So now when they do have to respect both sides, Terry's going to have a lot more big plays down the field. That's going to be his impact for me. Let's go. I want to go on the secondary side. This is the one that's been the biggest turnover. Trey Amos. What do you got on this guy? He's everything. They say he's just a dog. He's ready to get out there and play. How do you see how is his impact going to be on this field?
Yeah, I mean, look, on paper, there is no group that has improved more year over year to this point than the cornerback room. I don't have to go back and mention who was there out last year. I don't want to give people PTSD, but it was not great. So now you add Lattimore, obviously rough year for him, but he's healthy now. Let's see. Trey Amos has looked like a pro from day one. In fact, I was saying to somebody the other day, I feel like we didn't even talk about him that much over the second half of camp because there wasn't anything to discuss because he was already playing at a good level. Like Josh Connerly, we've discussed the improvement. Trey Amos, it's kind of like he came in, he was already good, and he just kept that up. Again, in practice, he was not facing Terry McLaurin, so that's something to note. And then in preseason, he's going up against, lesser opponents for the most part. So we still have more to see. And I'm sure he'll have some ups and downs as rookies do, especially at a position where you're so vulnerable like that. But he's been, I think, everything you could have asked for. And if he's able to deliver that press corner capability, same with Lattimore, that's just going to make Joe Witt's job so much easier. He's going to be able to send in more rushers that he wants to do. Last year, he had to sort of hold that back a bit because he didn't have as many good cornerbacks to deal one-on-one. If those guys can do that, that gives Joe Witt and Dan Quinn more of the defense that they had with Dallas, and that's what gets exciting. So, I'm intrigued to see what he does. First game of the year, Malik Neighbors is going to be out there for the Giants. We know how good he is, and it won't be just on him, but I'm sure he will see some of that. So far so good for Amos, and I think that it's just the arrow is pointing north for sure.
I think we can all agree we're more excited about that matchup with Malik Neighbors than we were when Mike Davis was on him last year. That was one of the more painful things to watch. Oh my goodness, that poor guy. I'm surprised he didn't get put in a wheelchair after that. He got crossed up so many times. It was crazy, man. We're here at Believe in Commanders podcast, part of the Believe Network. Scott Jackson, Anthony Armstrong, Ben Standig from the Substack, Last Man Standing. You can follow him on the X at Ben Standig as well. All right, you mentioned that Dan Quinn defense, but who's the dog that gets after the quarterback? Last year, obviously, Fowler did. Dorrance Armstrong had a nice year, got better as the year went on. I've talked to a lot of people around the team, some of the former players who really seem to think that Dorrance Armstrong could be in for a big season. But there's still got to be somebody else, right? We know Ken Law is going to be a space eater for them, Ben. But have you seen anybody on that edge that you say, okay, yeah, this is the guy that's going to kind of unlock what Dan Quinn's defense was in Dallas to Washington?
Yeah, look, I did a bit on my podcast yesterday, the last episode, where I did like sort of superlatives for the training camp, and it was like, who's the most outstanding player? I went with Debo, but for me, the runner-up was probably Dorrance Armstrong. I thought he was just maintained the momentum he had in the postseason, where he had 3.5 sacks after having 5 in the regular season. You would think on one hand, like he would be one of the guys that would be most comfortable playing last year in that defense because he was with Dan Quinn and Joe Witt before. But, whatever. He was also taking on a more higher profile role. Instead of being Micah Parsons' wingman, he was having to be more of the main guy. So far, so good, though. I think he's got a real shot to be, I don't know, sacks are always hard to gauge, but, 7, 8, maybe somewhere in that range. Frankie Louvu, of course, had 8.5 last year. He's the leading returning sacker. And then, of course, there's Von Miller. Now, we haven't seen much of him because, with a guy of his experience and age, they've definitely slow played that to a degree. But, he was still really effective last year. If you look at the stats in terms of like pass rush per or win rate, per snap, he was a top 10 guy with all the other big names you'd expect. It's just that his volume of plays was less. He missed some games, but also just, teams are not using him as like an every down guy anymore. So I think that to me is a huge key. But then again, like I said, if they feel comfortable with those corners, they can send more blitzers, whether that's a safety coming in or Bobby Wagner or what have you. So yeah, I would think those three guys at the top for me. The interesting part is also, what do any of the defensive tackles join that group?
Right.
Deron Payne, there was a lot of talk about him back in the spring. I think it's been a little quieter. That doesn't mean he's not playing as well, but we haven't heard as much about it. I think Javon Kinlaw has it's almost just like his size alone is the impressive part. But, I think there's something there. We saw Johnny Newton in that first preseason game, cause some havoc. So I think they've got some options in there. And if one of those guys at least can join that pass rush party, then that's going to make it, all the more tough for the opposing team.
All right, two impactful DBs. Both of them are, slot guys. One safety, Quan Martin, the other one, Mike Sanders still. Which one of those guys you see has the most impactful season and why?
That's a good question, because both of those guys I could see. Like Sanders still was another guy. He really, I thought, had an impressive camp. He's definitely not the biggest guy. I tweeted out the other day, like I put up a GIF of like a cat attacking a dog, and I said, this is Mikey Sanders still's mentality, because he doesn't care what the others, what else is going on, who else he's going up against. He's putting his head in there and his nose in there and going for it. So there's that. But I think Quan Martin, we don't talk about him a lot. Safety is generally a position I think that probably gets overlooked unless you were a guy who's making a lot of turnovers or big hits. But he's just continued to improve over time. I know Joe Witt threw out earlier the year that he could be one of the better safeties in the league if he keeps developing. We'll see about that. But, I'll give the nod to Quan Martin. He should be on the field basically every play. If they're going 4-3, I'm guessing Sanders still is the guy that maybe comes off versus Lattimore and Amos. So I think Quan Martin is positioned for a good year, to the point that, he's coming up on his, right? He's a free agent. No. Oh, he's got more time.
He's got more year 2 for him. Yeah.
It feels like he's been around forever, I guess is my point. But yeah, no, I think Quan's ascending, and he may put himself in a position to be the next guy to get a good contract if he has a good season this year.
Believe in Commanders podcast, part of the Believe Network. Scott Jackson, Anthony Armstrong, our guest Ben Standig from the Last Man Standing Substack. You can follow him there at Ben Standig on the X as well. All right, let's flip into offense, and let me give you your flowers. You were the only person. Now, I don't even want to say first, because you were the only person that put out the possibility that Brian Robinson was not going to be part of the final 53 here. And obviously you felt something early in camp, and obviously Bill Krosky-Merritt certainly helped push him out the door. Chris Rodriguez, I guess we could say too, and where his contract was. How do you kind of see that grouping now that we have the final 4 that are in there, and of course Jeremy McNichols and old Austin Eckler? Like, how's it going to look when we get to week 1? Is it a timeshare? Is it more of, no, Bill is the guy, or how do you kind of see them divvying out those carries?
It's funny. Like, Bill had a very good summer. He was a guy that just like throughout training camp, just like every day, was like, whoa, look at that play, look at that move. Oddly, like, I'm not saying anything has changed, but I oddly feel slightly like from say like a fantasy perspective, I feel like less interested in Bill without Brian Robinson, because in my head I was like, him versus Brian Robinson, I think he's going to beat Brian Robinson out here sooner than later. I'm not saying Chris Rodriguez is different, but Chris Rodriguez is more of a wild card. We don't know exactly his full deal. We've seen him be the power back. I am curious to see more what can he do in the passing game. I think ultimately though this will be a committee, at least say the first month, and then they'll see where they're at with Rodriguez and Bill. Bill has the biggest upside because of that one cut burst that he has, just really impressive. But I also think, to go back to sort of the Terry discussion earlier, the thing about Brian Robinson was when he was out in the field in a hurry up situation, I think if you're the defense, either A, it's a run, or B, he's not going to be involved, because he basically got he got only 25 targets last year total, and they didn't view him as a pass catcher. So, and also he just, when he was in there, he was not making big plays. Like, he only had 5 plays last year of 20 or more yards. Krosky Merritt, we saw the other day the 27-yard touchdown run. We saw Chris Rodriguez's run. I know it's preseason, but just saying those things happen. So I just think whoever they have out there at running back is going to give them going to give defense pause to think it's going to be definitively anything. All those guys, especially Eckler, but all those guys can run pass, I think. And so that's going to open things up, I think, even more for Cliff Kingsbury and the receiver. So, but anyway, committee to start. Rodriguez is the goal line short yardage back to start. And then I think we just see how quickly can Bill show that he's worthy of being, if not the lead guy, at least the guy getting more work.
Yeah, I think big plays is definitely a requirement for this offense. I know that last year they did a great job staying on the field. Yeah. Cliff Kingsbury, going way back to Texas Tech days, it was the air raid offense. That was points on points on points. You talk about 28, they were putting up 56 continually. He didn't want to go 12 and 13 plays. He wants to put something on the board and get the ball in the end zone. Last bit, at least for me, from the tight end position. You know, who is Zach Ertz, and then it's kind of everybody else. Who's going to make the biggest jump from that group, either John Bates, Colson Yankoff, or Ben Sinnott?
Well, I think John Bates is locked in with the, his blocking, he's viewed as one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. I've been saying that I think we'll know how well the offensive line is doing if John Bates gets more than 20 catches or not. Because he was utilized more previously under the other regime than he was last year as a pass catcher. But that's in part because they needed him so often to stay in and block. If they go 12 personnel, but now he's able to run out, I think that's a good sign for the line. The other two guys, look, I think we're all probably hoping to see a little bit more from Ben Sinnott this summer than we did. Yankoff is an insane athlete, and I feel like he stood out to me more this summer. I'm not to say that he's the new third tight end or that he's going to be Zach Ertz's replacement, whatever that time might come, but he stood out to me a bit more. I still don't quite know what Sinnott ultimately is. So yeah, I think it's Ertz and Bates, and then we'll see which of those other two guys does something. And by the way, to go back to something you just said a minute ago about the Cliff Kingsbury and they held the ball, but they weren't scoring as much as maybe he would like. We talk so much about the schedule is going to be harder this year. They're going to play a lot tougher quarterbacks. It doesn't seem to me to be realistic that they're going to be a team that can go 3 games without having to punt. That. Right. That's insane that was happening. Right. So if they come back to the mean a little bit, now you're going to have to be more explosive because you're not going to have as many of these long drives and chewing up the clock and wearing out the defense. So yeah, I do think the big plays is going to have to be there because again, if Tress Wade goes 3 games without punting again, I mean, that would be nuts.
Well, part of being explosive, of course, is having your second-year star quarterback continue to look like a star and continue to trend upwards. What do you look at from him this year? You've watched him every day. You've listened to him every day. Do you think they're going to try to get him to run less, or are they going to try to emphasize him getting the ball downfield a little bit more? What do you expect from Jaden Daniels year 2 in terms of the way he'll operate?
Every time I have a doubt about this team, again, like the schedule is going to be harder. They were really fortunate in these 1-score games. And every time I'm like, okay, I'm ready to sort of be the Debbie Downer here. And then I'm like, oh, wait, 5 is there. That guy, I don't see a sophomore slump. I only see an ascending player. Even this summer when, again, he didn't have his outside receivers, the accuracy on some of his long passes was still pretty remarkable. He's only getting smarter. Sure, you got to avoid the injuries. That run he did against the Bengals, even I was like, dude, get down. What are you running? He was fortunate the Bengals guys decided they thought he was wearing a non-contact jersey or something, and they kind of let him go. I think his ability to throw the ball down the field is why he should not be viewed as just like a mobile quarterback. Even if he didn't run, he would be really effective, I think. And, again, he is only his first year in the league. It's hard to say if he does the same thing. Some might say that's a plateau. I would say that's amazing because he was so good last year. And that was, without Debo, with a lesser offensive line, with no experience. So the sky is the limit for him. I'm usually a guy who's cautious with my takes, but I don't think that I need to do that here. He looks that good. So yeah, as long as he avoids the injuries, and that can happen to any quarterback. I think he's just going to have another year. We're going to get to the point, if it's not this year, the next, that he's in the MVP conversation.
Love it. All right. Ben Standig, again, at Ben Standig on the X. Give him a follow there. And Last Man Standig on the Substack. You can subscribe and get all his updates, videos. Also, of course, the written work as well. Ben, appreciate your time and your insights, man. Thanks for joining us here on Believe in Commanders podcast.
Fellas, thanks for having me, and congrats on the partnership here. But Anthony, you're gonna have to carry a lot of this show here, but I appreciate. I'm sure you're up to it.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I've been lifting lately. We good though. Scott don't leave too much for me now.
No, Scott's the best. Thanks, guys.
All right, buddy. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Nice.
All right. Thanks to Ben Standig from Substack at Last Man Standing. And also you can check him out at Ben Standig on the X as well. All right. Well, look, Ben's feeling good about Jaden Daniels, about the offense, even with the harder schedule. And we're all feeling good about, Micah Parsons being in Green Bay. Maybe we won't be on that week 2 Thursday nighter, but at least the rest of the season and years to come, you won't have to worry about him being in your division, which is true. Certainly a relief. So we thank Jerry Jones for that. And, hey, look, you're down there in Cowboy country, Anthony, just give him a hug. If you see him out there, them Cowboy fans, give him a hug, to say, hey, it's going to be all right. I will do that. Yeah, tell them it's going to be all right. Well,
I've been consoling folks. I will say this.
Yeah.
I think the doors may be open for a 1-season membership if anybody is trying to, pick a different, team they want to root for. Dan Quinn is still there. At least you know him, and Joe Witt's there, so you can cheer for that if anything.
Ken Norton Jr. Ken Norton Jr.
Yeah, you got Ken Norton Jr. as legendary Cowboy, Dorrance Armstrong. Yep. You got all that involved. So you come on over here to the Burgundy and Gold and cheer for them. But make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and stick with us and stay with us because coming up, week 1, 6.5 points on FanDuel against the Giants. Next week, we're going to connect with the folks from a Believe in Giants show, be it Bob Papa or Carl Banks, one of them. I'm making promises that I can't keep, but they better show up. So it's going down next week. Y'all stay locked with us on Believe in Commander. Scott Jackson, Anthony Armstrong. Y'all be good.